Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Greg Cochran, and I'm Managing Director with Pilko and Associates. I'm joined today by Larry Schmid. Larry is our president, and Larry has a lot of experience on the subject matter today. Our subject today is avoiding internal competition, functional competition within the organization. Larry, before we begin and get in-depth discussion, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind. Just reintroduce yourself.
Yeah, just very quickly. Good morning to you, Greg. So I've been in the industry for 35 years. I've worked 25 of those for Roman Haas and the remaining 10 for Dow Chemical. Mostly, manufacturing and supply chain roles, and then progressing up to senior global manufacturing and supply chain leadership roles. So I'll give you the short version today.
It's great. And I know that all of our clients, our watchers, they know you already because they've been watching this and watching other things that you're involved in. Do me a favor, start with defining what we're talking about today a bit. Internal functional competition. How do you describe that, or how would you describe that? What is it?
Yeah, so it helps if we think about how an organization evolves, right? So if you take an organization, a smaller organization where everyone wears different hats, the goals are clearly defined, they're well understood, customer client needs are well aligned throughout the organization, and change is managed in a way that everybody kind of understands it and they understand the why. But what happens is, we know as organizations grow over time, the workload increases. And so we have to hire some type of functional expertise. And in some cases, if the function gets large enough, we'll hire functional leaders. And they obviously start to build the organization out, but, justified based on growth and workload. And that's necessary, right? As you build those functions, it's necessary to manage chaos, bring some discipline, and make sure that we provide the right service, and we're in compliance. That's another big one, right? We're in compliance with what we do. So the organization then no longer lends itself to sort of informal communications, typical of what you would see in a smaller group with 10, 12, 15 people or so. So where does the functional competition come into play? The functions then must really begin to justify their existence, right? In how they add value for the organization. So you don't just get to bring on people, you got to make sure that you're significantly contributing to the organization's goals. And so they do develop goals, and some of those goals are aligned with the corporate objectives, and some of them are not. They're really aligned more functionally based on their expertise and what they deliver. And that's where we start to see some of the wires getting crossed, or we start to sub-optimize a bit. When functions build themselves and they define their goals, and they're not necessarily consistent with other functions, but the functions have to work together. So we get sometimes what we call the competing scorecards. And so that's where this notion of functional competition comes about, that we see with many of our clients.
Give us, I get that very clearly. I understand exactly what you're talking about. I think an example may help the audience to really put that bring that clarity. Give us an example.
Well, let's use one that I think folks can relate to. So if we think about a company that has got a large turnaround plan for 2022, second half of 2022, and the manufacturing site is clearly going to go out and enlist the help of procurement to ensure that the vast array of contractors that they need to do this work, it's a big turnaround. So you're going to need a number of different specialty contractors and crafts and so on and so forth. So they get the support from the procurement organization because, as we said before, the organization is bigger and you got to go to the right areas of expertise. So what's manufacturing going to be focused on? They're going to be focused on safety. They're going to be focused on the quality of the work. They're going to be focused on making sure their schedule compliance is in line with what the business expects. And of course, they're going to make sure that they hit their budget. They don't want to exceed their budget. Procurement is focused on getting the organization the best overall cost position to complete the scope of the work, with some researcher inputs on contractor safety. Maybe they look at certain things about the quality of their work. That's where things begin to get a bit interesting, right? So let's assume now we move forward in time and the turnaround starts. So we're in day one or week one. And all of a sudden we realize that the contractor can't get the complement numbers that they promised us. And so now we're forced to go back with procurement and say, hey, we can't get the support we need. You've got to supplement. So in this reactive mode, we go out, we get additional contractors coming in on the fly to help fill the gap. This is where the coordination and the planning becomes a big challenge, and it starts to come off the rails. And then as the work's progressing, you've got folks that you haven't properly vetted. So the quality of the work, the productivity is not where it needs to be. So when quality is not there, we got to do recycle work, which means we got to go back and do it again. When the productivity is not there, means we're taking longer. We're going to extend beyond the date. So what happens? Manufacturing ends up blowing some of the metrics, right? Maybe they were okay on safety, but they blew the budget, and and they did, the quality of the work was terrible. So the schedule was poor. So, this is where the metrics become very important. There's no, the site blows their metrics while procurement looked pretty good. At the end of the year, they may have got patting on back, right? For, hey, nice job, you got a low cost contractor. Nobody looks at all the other stuff that happened on the other side of the fence. So there's no rocket science here, but I think there's certainly a need to make sure when you do the math, a high quality contractor, you might spend a little bit more money up front, but they'll deliver you better overall economics, right? So if their quality is good, if their productivity is good, you're going to get the support you need, and you're not going to miss shipments to customers, and you're not going to run long, which is obviously a big loss from a margin perspective, right? So that's the example.
Larry, one of the things as you were talking about, all the experiences you have, I was thinking about my own career, so forgive me for that. But I had some years in manufacturing, some years in EH&S. I actually had some time in purchasing and procurement organizations. I guess I was just thinking about, having those different experiences in my background helps to do what you do, I think. So give me your thoughts around that. What do you think about?
When we see employees that are developed in different parts of the organization, they come with a more holistic mindset, and they help other functions understand what the challenges are in other areas. And they know what to look out for, and they know where to challenge, and they know where you're going to get in trouble. So I think the point that you make around making sure you give folks the opportunity to have time in different functions makes them better leaders, and obviously helps to address what we've been talking about here, where's this functional competition thing, because you're getting more folks that are working together that really understand the challenges in different parts of the organization. Right. And they highlight that for their employees. So it's a very important point, and really speaks again to the importance of developing folks in different areas and different functions.
A couple of things that jump out to me as you were talking, Larry. First of all, balanced scorecards. If everybody's measuring success, you have functional excellence, you have corporate, objectives, and if everybody's using the same scorecard, or at least on the same page with their scorecard, they're pulling in the same direction. That's critical. The second thing that you said, or that came to my mind when you were talking, is, and you're a corporate executive, you've been a corporate executive for a long time. So I can see where you'd have functional alignment or corporate alignment at the senior level, but it begins to get, diluted maybe when you get down to the middle levels or the lower levels in the organization. How do you keep everybody on the same page? I guess that's where I was coming from.
I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to really take a look at some of the overlap in the scorecards, and to make sure. So in the example I used, wouldn't it be great if the site and procurement were held accountable to the same performance?
Absolutely.
And so, it takes a little bit more work to do that, because you got to go pick those big areas where there's overlap. It's really easy for any function to go off at the end of the year for the next year and build their own scorecard in a vacuum. Not that it's always done that way, but it's a lot of work to go into other areas within the organization. And who drives that? Is the function going to drive that independently, or is that driven from the top of the house? So these metrics become very important, because people will perform to the metrics that they have. They'll do their best to meet those. But if they're not common, and if they're not well aligned, this is really important, aligned scorecards, you get the functional competition and what we call competing scorecards.
Yeah. And I'll go back to my comment a minute ago. As a corporate executive in a major, global multinational company, that's one of your key functions, isn't it? To keep everybody aligned, to keep that. And there's a lot of elements to alignment. We know that, clear communications, regular, touch points, but leadership matters here. I mean, it really does matter in achieving or avoiding this internal functional competition.
Absolutely.
Tell me more about that, or just expand on that if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, I think what it means is, as a leader, you got to spend more time not just looking at your area of responsibility, but looking at how others are going to support you, and going off to spend the time to talk to those other leaders about what they're accomplishing in any given year and how they're going to support you and how can we align on those metrics.
Yeah.
So I think that becomes very important. It's more work, it's more time, but that alignment up front will pay off, very, very significant dividends throughout the year as you get into the real work on the ground floor.
So if we look at today's global economy and the volatility of it today, if you will, maybe this is not unusual over our lifetimes, but it seems like there's a lot going on today, a lot more than maybe normal. How are organizations managing keeping everybody on the same page, keeping their functions aligned and pulling in the right direction? How are they doing that?
The first thing is to really make sure that you get around these competing scorecards. So in the turnaround example, like we said, right, manufacturing and procurement really need to get aligned on turnarounds. They're so big, you spend so much money that you really got to make sure that everybody is rewarded for the right metrics and the right behaviors. The second is that, is really around balance. And, we didn't talk today much about, centers of excellence and that sort of thing, or expertise centers, but central functions can get so large that they lose track of what's reality in the organization. And it's not an either or. I think that you need to have some central functions with the right governance objectives, but to the extent you can hold that to a minimum, you're better off. The businesses really need to own the resources for executing the corporate standards and work processes. Now, they certainly must have some latitude to test the need, the affordability, and the value generated. So that is very important. But I think, many of the organizations we deal with, they have this backward, where the central functions have the resources, many of which have never ever worked in or walked in the shoes of a manufacturing employee or leader, nor do they know if their work is truly going to work. So that's a real challenge in and of itself. But I do think that, and I want to just highlight this point, Greg, that there are things that central functions do. If we take, for example, process safety, EH&S, expertise centers, they really need to define those things that we agree are non-negotiables. Those are things that I don't care where you are in the world, you got to do it the same way, the way it's prescribed every time. And we do that for a reason. If you could think of things like, safety, environmental, process safety, life-saving rules, those are areas where they're just non-negotiables. We can't miss in those areas. So they have to be very clearly well-defined. Now, there's other things that centers will push out that speak to standards that the organization expects, not beyond process safety, environmental health, health and safety, and that sort of thing. That there should be some latitude to the businesses and the sites as to how they do that, based on their different challenges and situations. So I think that getting that balance right, where the resources are biased to the area where the work is really being done is critical. So I think that's what most organizations are struggling with today.
Yeah, in my mind, Larry, again, in the global economy today, resources are limited, and so you need to prioritize and get everybody pulling on, on that or in the same direction, or else you're actually, draining away some of the assets of the company, if you will. So you need to make sure that they're on the same page. Is there any particular point that we haven't covered this morning that you would like to cover that I haven't asked about?
I think I just touched on it. I think, we talked about the turnaround example being one where I think it's, hopefully pretty clear to people where, the manufacturing and the procurement function can get, a bit off track.
Right.
I mean, I think the other big one today is really organizations need to really take a close look at you call them whatever, centers of excellence, expertise centers. Some of those organizations have just gotten so large, and they are not in tune with the business objectives. So, there's a real opportunity there to revisit those organizations, how they're structured, where should those resources be, what are the non-negotiables, where do you have freedom to implement based on the resources I have, the affordability, and whether or not it's even applicable to what I do. We get a lot of situations where something gets pushed to a site and they don't even need to do that. It's just not even necessary for them to do that. They're not addressing any particular risk, that would cause the organization harm. So I think that's the area that I think lends itself to a lot of opportunity. And like I said, I just want to close with this, that it's not no center of excellence and everything in the field. And, it's not the opposite way around either, large organizations. But you got to find the right place on that pendulum for your organization that's, sort of that sweet spot to drive the organization in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. It's a great summary. And obviously, you've got a lot of experience here. If you'd like to know more about what Larry was talking about this morning around internal functional competition and how to avoid that, please reach out to us at www.pilko.com, and we'd love to get back to you. Thank you for your attention this morning, and we hope you have a great day.